Have you ever walked away from a conversation feeling smaller than when you entered, not because of anything you could clearly point to, but because something shifted, something was taken, and you couldn't name what it was? That feeling is not confusing. It is not a weakness. It is the fingerprint of a manipulator. Manipulation rarely looks like what you imagine. It doesn't announce itself. It doesn't come with a warning label or a raised voice. It shows up dressed in charm, in flattery, in carefully timed silence, in concern that feels a little too convenient, in kindness that always arrives with a hidden invoice. And by the time you realize what happened, by the time the fog clears enough for you to see the pattern, you've already handed over something you can't easily take back. Your confidence. Your decisions. Your sense of what is real. Niccolò Machiavelli understood this centuries before psychology had a name for it. He lived in a world where power was the only currency that mattered, where courts were filled with people who smiled at your face while sharpening a blade behind your back. He didn't romanticize human nature. He studied it, coldly, precisely, without illusion. And what he found was this: most people are not driven primarily by morality or reason. They are driven by fear, by desire, and by the relentless need to protect and expand their own position. Manipulators are simply people who have learned to exploit that truth in others while hiding it in themselves. That knowledge is dangerous in the wrong hands. But in yours, it becomes armor. This video is not about becoming ruthless. It is not about learning to manipulate in return. It is about something far more powerful. It is about becoming the kind of person no manipulator can get a grip on. The kind of person who sees through the performance, controls their own reactions, and moves through the world with the calm clarity of someone who can no longer be played. By the end of this video, you will understand 7 specific strategies rooted in Machiavellian thinking that will change how you read people, how you protect yourself, and how you respond when someone is quietly trying to take control of your reality. These are not soft tips. They are precise, psychologically grounded, and effective. And at least one of them will explain something that has been confusing you for a very long time. Stay with this. What you're about to learn matters. If you've ever felt manipulated, controlled, or psychologically outmaneuvered by someone in your life, and you want to understand exactly how that happened and how to make sure it never happens again, like this video and subscribe. This channel is built for people who want to understand the hidden mechanics of human behavior and come out stronger on the other side. Hit subscribe so you don't miss what's coming next. Before we get into the 7 strategies, you need to understand something about why manipulation works so well on intelligent, self-aware people. Because here is the uncomfortable truth: it is often the most thoughtful, empathetic, and conscientious people who become targets. Not the careless ones. Not the ignorant ones. The ones who care too much about being fair. The ones who always try to see the other person's side. The ones who feel guilty quickly and are hard on themselves when things go wrong. Manipulators do not look for weakness in the conventional sense. They look for investment. They look for someone who is emotionally present, someone who values the relationship, someone who will try to fix things when they break. Because that person, the one who cares, is the one who can be leveraged. You can't easily manipulate someone who doesn't care. But someone who wants to be understood, to be loved, to be seen as fair. That person has something to lose. And that is exactly what a manipulator needs. This is why so many victims spend years believing the problem was them. Because manipulators are masterful at creating that narrative. They construct a world in which every conflict is your fault, every boundary you set is an attack on them, every moment of clarity you experience is reframed as paranoia or selfishness. They don't just manipulate your behavior. They manipulate your perception of reality. And the longer it goes on, the harder it becomes to trust your own judgment. Machiavelli wrote that people are far more controlled by what they fear losing than what they hope to gain. Manipulators understand this intuitively, even if they've never read a word of political philosophy. They know that the threat of abandonment, of disapproval, of being wrong or unkind or ungrateful, can keep someone compliant far longer than any direct command. They weaponize your values against you. Understanding this is not enough to protect you. But it is where protection begins. Because the moment you see the architecture, the moment you understand how the control is being built, it starts to lose its hold. Now let's dismantle it. Strategy by strategy. The first strategy is mastering emotional detachment, not coldness, but control. Manipulators are, at their core, emotional engineers. They study your reactions the way a mechanic studies an engine. They learn which buttons produce which responses. Guilt, defensiveness, anxiety, the desperate urge to explain yourself, these are all fuel for them. Every time you react emotionally and predictably, you hand them data. You show them which levers work. And they will pull those levers again and again, with increasing precision, until your emotional reactions become almost automatic. The antidote is not to become emotionally numb. That is not possible, and it's not the goal. The goal is to create a gap, a deliberate space between what you feel and how you respond. Machiavelli called this virtue, not virtue in the moral sense, but the capacity to remain composed and purposeful under pressure. The ability to feel the storm and not become it. When a manipulator escalates, when they accuse, guilt-trip, or suddenly become cold and withholding, the trained response is to match their energy. To justify, to defend, to try to restore peace. But that response is exactly what they are counting on. The moment you react, they win the frame. They become the one who provoked and you become the one who lost control. They have turned your own emotions into a weapon against you. What disrupts this entirely is calm. Not cold hostility. Not silence used as punishment. But genuine, measured composure. The kind of response that says, I see what you're doing, and I am unmoved by it. This is deeply unsettling to a manipulator because it removes the feedback loop they depend on. If pulling the lever produces nothing, eventually they stop pulling it. The deeper practice here is learning to observe your own emotional states in real time. To notice when you are feeling guilt, anxiety, or the desperate need to smooth things over, and to ask yourself, is this response mine, or was it engineered? Because manipulators do not just provoke your emotions randomly. They provoke specific emotions, at specific moments, to produce specific outcomes. When you start to notice the pattern, you break the spell. The second strategy is learning to read patterns instead of words. This is where most people fail. They listen to what a manipulator says and they try to make sense of it, to reconcile the contradictions, to understand the logic. But manipulation is not meant to make logical sense. It is meant to create confusion. And confusion is a control mechanism. Manipulators are often extraordinarily gifted with language. They can explain away anything. They can take a pattern of behavior that, seen plainly, would horrify you, and frame it in language so reasonable, so wounded, so filled with regret, that you end up consoling them for what they did to you. They can turn a boundary you set into evidence of your cruelty. They can take a lie you caught them in and make you feel ashamed for having noticed. Do not analyze their words. Watch their behavior over time. Patterns do not lie. Patterns are what someone does when they think no one is paying close attention. A manipulator can explain a single incident with impressive eloquence. But they cannot explain away a pattern, not when you are the one holding the full record. The third time someone does the same thing, the explanation is irrelevant. The pattern is the truth. Machiavelli wrote that men judge more by the eye than by the hand, meaning, by appearances rather than reality. Manipulators know this, and they invest heavily in appearances. They know that most people are watching the performance, not the pattern underneath it. Your advantage comes when you stop watching the performance. Start keeping internal notes. Not to build a case. Not to confront. Simply to remember clearly, because manipulators depend heavily on your memory being blurry. They thrive in the fog of emotional confusion. Clear, private documentation of what actually happened, not your feelings about it, but the concrete facts, is one of the most powerful tools you have. The third strategy is limiting information access. There is a concept Machiavelli returned to repeatedly: the danger of being known too well by those who do not wish you well. In his world, this meant keeping your strategies and intentions private from rivals and enemies. In your world, it means being thoughtful, strategically thoughtful, about how much of yourself you reveal, and to whom. Manipulators build their control from the inside out. The more they know about your fears, your insecurities, your desires, and your history, the more precisely they can target you. Information is the raw material of manipulation. Your vulnerabilities are not weaknesses they stumbled onto by accident, they are intelligence they gathered, often during the early stages of a relationship when you felt safe, seen, and understood. That early feeling of being deeply understood, of finally finding someone who gets you, is often a red flag, though it rarely feels like one at the time. Genuine connection develops gradually, through shared experience and time. When someone seems to understand you perfectly quickly, ask yourself, how did they acquire this knowledge, and how are they using it? Going forward, practice strategic privacy. This is not about becoming closed or guarded in every relationship. It is about earning the right to your most private self. Let trust develop through demonstrated behavior over time, not through charm or emotional intensity alone. What you do not share cannot be used against you. And in environments where trust has already been broken, reclaiming your privacy is one of the most quietly powerful moves you can make. The fourth strategy is using strategic silence. Silence is one of the most underrated tools in any psychological confrontation. Most people cannot sit comfortably in silence. We are conditioned to fill it, to respond, to explain, to reduce tension. And manipulators know this. They provoke, they accuse, they create an emotional pressure that demands a response. And in that rush to respond, you reveal more than you intended. You justify things that didn't need justification. You apologize for things that weren't your fault. You explain yourself so thoroughly that you turn a position of strength into a position of scrambling. What happens when you don't respond immediately? The manipulator is left with their own words hanging in the air. No argument to dismantle. No emotion to redirect. No reaction to use. And in the discomfort of that silence, something very interesting often occurs: they start to fill it themselves. They over-explain. They escalate. They reveal the emotional need behind the manipulation, the need for a reaction, for control, for reassurance that the lever still works. They show you more than they intended. Silence is not the same as avoidance. You are not running away from the confrontation. You are choosing the timing and the terms of your response. This is a fundamental power shift. When someone makes a provocative statement and you pause, you breathe, you think, you let the silence exist, you are no longer dancing to their rhythm. You are establishing your own. In practice, this can be as simple as saying nothing immediately after an accusation. Waiting 5 seconds before responding to a message designed to provoke anxiety. Taking 24 hours before replying to an emotionally loaded email. Each of these pauses is a reclamation of control. Each one sends a signal, not of weakness, not of confusion, but of someone who is not easily rattled. And that signal alone changes the dynamic. The fifth strategy is setting firm, non-negotiable boundaries. Manipulators are boundary testers by nature. It is not an accident or an oversight when they push past a limit you have set. It is a deliberate assessment. They are learning whether your limits are real or performative. And if bending one boundary is met with discomfort but not consequence, they will bend the next one a little further. This is not cruelty. It is strategy. They are mapping your tolerance for being crossed. This is why the consistency of your boundaries matters far more than the forcefulness with which you announce them. You can state a boundary clearly once. You do not need to shout. You do not need to explain the philosophy behind it or justify it with your trauma history or convince the other person it is reasonable. A boundary is not a request for understanding. It is a definition of how you will be treated. The only conversation worth having about it is what happens when it is violated. And this is the part most people miss: a boundary with no consequence is not a boundary. It is a suggestion. Manipulators have experienced enough final warnings that carry nothing behind them to know the difference between someone who means what they say and someone who is negotiating with themselves out loud. The moment they see that violation produces no change in your behavior, no distance, no consequence, no follow-through, they recalibrate. They now know you can be pushed. You do not need to be angry. You do not need to be confrontational. You simply need to be consistent. Quiet, steady, consistent. Because manipulators are opportunists, and consistency removes the opportunity. There is no crack in the wall for them to push through. And when someone cannot find a way in, they eventually, not always quickly, but eventually, stop trying. We are now at the point in this conversation where things start to get darker. Because everything we've covered so far, the emotional control, the pattern recognition, the strategic silence, these are defenses. They are ways to protect your position. But the manipulators who are hardest to outmaneuver are not the ones who push loudly against your defenses. They are the ones who never look like they're attacking at all. The most sophisticated manipulation doesn't feel like manipulation. It feels like love, or loyalty, or concern. It wraps itself in the language of connection and care so completely that setting a boundary against it feels like an act of cruelty. And the strategies we're about to go into, the ones in the back half of this video, are specifically designed for that level of psychological complexity. Before we go there, drop a comment below. Have you ever recognized a manipulator in your life only after the damage was already done? What was the first sign you missed? You might be helping someone else put a name to something they've been carrying for a long time. The sixth strategy is detaching from the need for approval. This is the one that goes deepest. Because approval is not a superficial desire, it is a fundamental human need. We are wired to want acceptance, to belong, to be seen as good. This is not a character flaw. It is part of what makes us human. But in the hands of a manipulator, it becomes the most powerful lever of all. The manipulation that relies on approval seeking is arguably the most elegant form of control, because it does not require force. It does not even require threats. It simply requires the consistent, subtle withdrawal of warmth, a slight coolness in the tone, a distant look, a compliment withheld at exactly the right moment, and the target does all the work themselves. They adjust. They accommodate. They smooth themselves into whatever shape seems most likely to restore the approval. And each time they do, the manipulator learns, this works. Machiavelli was clear that dependence on the goodwill of others is one of the most dangerous positions a person can occupy. Not because people are universally malicious, but because goodwill is conditional and controllable, and anyone who knows you need it has power over you that they did not have to earn. You gave it to them the moment you made their approval a requirement for your emotional stability. Detaching from approval does not mean becoming indifferent to how others perceive you. It means decoupling your sense of self from external validation in a way that makes you genuinely less manipulable. When you no longer need someone to approve of you, when you can sit with their disapproval, their silence, their withholding of warmth, without crumbling, you remove an entire category of leverage from their toolkit. This is deep psychological work. It requires confronting the places where your self-worth has been outsourced, often to people who are not safe custodians of it. It requires building an internal foundation strong enough that someone's coldness feels uncomfortable but not existentially threatening. It requires, in short, learning to be your own authority. And when you reach that place, something remarkable happens. manipulators lose interest. Not because you've become hostile or unreachable, but because you've become unprofitable. The seventh strategy is thinking 2 steps ahead, anticipating motive, not just behavior. This is where Machiavellian thinking becomes most useful, and most often misunderstood. When people hear, "think like Machiavelli," they imagine cunning schemes and cold calculations. But the core of what Machiavelli advocated was something more fundamental, the habit of asking why, not just what. Most people respond to behavior. They react to what someone does without asking what the person stands to gain from doing it. And that single blind spot, the failure to trace behavior back to motive, is what allows sophisticated manipulation to operate in plain sight for months, sometimes years. Every manipulative act serves a purpose. Every piece of praise designed to lower your guard, every guilt trip designed to extract a concession, every manufactured crisis designed to redirect your attention, these are not random. They are purposeful. They are moves in a strategy you haven't seen the full board of yet. The moment you start asking, what does this person gain from this? Not accusingly, not in paranoia, but as a calm, habitual practice, you start to see the board. Start with the simple question, who benefits? When someone offers you something that feels too warm, too convenient, or too well-timed, ask who benefits if you accept it. When a conflict erupts out of nowhere, ask what the conflict redirects attention from. When someone is suddenly unusually kind after a period of cold distance, ask what they need from you that they're preparing to request. This is not cynicism. Cynicism assumes the worst without evidence. This is discernment, the practiced, evidence-based ability to understand what is actually driving a situation. And it is profoundly empowering. Because when you understand the motive, you are no longer reacting to the surface. You are engaging with the reality beneath it. You are, for the first time, playing the same game they have been playing, not to hurt anyone, but to protect yourself with full information. Here is the piece that most people never get to. The piece that, once you see it, changes everything. Manipulators do not operate from strength. They operate from the performance of strength. Everything they do, the control, the guilt trips, the carefully managed withdrawal of affection, the strategic displays of power, every single piece of it is designed to hide something. And what it hides is this: they are terrified. Not in the way you might be afraid. Not openly, not vulnerably, not in a way they could even fully acknowledge. But at the root of every pattern of manipulation is someone who believes, on a deep, largely unconscious level, that they cannot survive without control. That if they do not manage other people's perceptions, needs, and behavior with constant vigilance, something catastrophic will happen. That genuine connection without leverage is too dangerous to attempt. Machiavelli wrote that a prince who relies solely on fortune for his power is lost when fortune changes, because he has built nothing of his own. Manipulators are like this. Their power is entirely relational, it only exists in the space between themselves and someone they can control. Remove yourself from that space, and the power evaporates. There is nothing behind the curtain except someone who never learned to exist without performance. This is not an invitation to pity them. Pity is often exactly what they count on. It is one of the most effective manipulation traps there is. Understanding this is not about softening your response. It is about removing the mythology. The manipulator in your life is not all-powerful. They are not untouchable. They are not operating from some elevated position of psychological sophistication that you could never match. They are running a survival strategy that stopped developing at some point long ago, and they have been executing it on every person they've gotten close to ever since. And the reason it keeps working is not because it is genius. It is because most of us were never taught to see it. You have just been taught to see it. And once you see it clearly, once the performance becomes visible, once the pattern becomes undeniable, once the fear behind the control is exposed, it loses its magic completely. The spell breaks not with a confrontation, not with a dramatic revelation, not with the perfect argument. It breaks quietly, internally, in the moment you stop believing the story they've been telling about who you are. That is when you are free. There is a version of you that has already absorbed everything in this video, not just intellectually, but in the way you move through a room, the way you respond to pressure, the way you trust yourself when something feels wrong. That version of you is not suspicious of everyone. They are not cold. They are not ruthless. They are simply clear. Clear about what they feel and what was engineered. Clear about what they will tolerate and what they will not. Clear about the difference between genuine connection and strategic performance. Clear enough to pause before reacting, to watch the pattern before trusting the words, to know their own worth without needing someone else to confirm it. Machiavelli's core insight was not that the world is full of bad people. It was that the world is full of people pursuing their own interests, and that pretending otherwise, while noble in feeling, is dangerous in practice. You do not need to become strategic or calculating to navigate that world. But you do need to be honest about what it is. Protection does not come from becoming harder. It comes from becoming more awake. It comes from the 7 practices we walked through together, the emotional detachment that keeps your reactions from being weaponized, the pattern recognition that cuts through verbal fog, the strategic privacy that removes their ammunition, the silence that disrupts their control, the boundaries that mean exactly what they say, the self-worth that doesn't need external approval to remain intact, and the habit of thinking about motive that puts you permanently one step ahead. None of this is about revenge. None of it requires you to become someone you're not. It simply requires you to take seriously the idea that your mind, your peace, and your sense of reality are worth protecting, not occasionally, not only when things get bad enough, but consistently, as a way of life. You are not paranoid for noticing. You are not weak for having been affected. And you are not powerless. You never were. You simply didn't have the language yet. You have it now. Use it. Thank you for watching this all the way through. That tells me this topic matters to you, and I want you to know that this channel is built for exactly that. If this video gave you clarity, if it helped you name something you've been carrying, share it, because there is someone in your life right now who needs to see this. Subscribe if you haven't already, so you don't miss what's coming. And when you're ready, the next video is already waiting for you.